Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, where we bring you data and science-backed answers and advice from billionaires. What's up, everyone? Welcome to Will's Personal Development Podcast, the counterpart to my blog, Will's Personal Development Blog, where we use science-backed evidence and advice from only the best in the world when we cover topics. So in this podcast episode, we will be talking about how you can become mentally strong or mentally tough. There's different variations of the phrase, but it's mainly how do you become mentally strong? So when I first heard about this, I didn't really think it was that important, and I was wrong. It turns out not only do a lot of people want to know how to become mentally strong, but they really find this valuable. For me, when I first heard this, I was like the rest of the world, and I was like, who cares? Like, this is something for Army people, Navy SEALs. Like, I don't want to be a Navy SEAL. I just want to, make a lot of money, make impact, become a master at my craft. I don't need to prove myself by joining the Army. I think there's a lot of people who are really fixated on joining the Army or becoming a SEAL or something that just like proves their mental strength. And that's what turned me off. And I was completely switched off. But then something happened and everything changed. And now I realize how important it is to be mentally strong. Now, that's for another day, another discussion. I could talk about it a lot, but essentially I started reading books like Mindset, The Psychology of Success, and studying literature. And long story short, I discovered that a lot of successful people, especially athletes, the widely regarded as the best female soccer player of all time, Mia Hamm, and the best basketball player of all time, Michael Jordan, they both have stepped up and said that mental toughness is one of the most important things. In fact, I can pull up the exact quote right here from each of them just to give you like a sense of what I'm talking about. But then I started reading other athletes. I read Rich Fronin's book first. He is the widely regarded as the best CrossFit player of all time. CrossFit is a sport. It's also a training, and there's gyms all across the world, hundreds of thousands, probably thousands of gyms. And they have this thing called the CrossFit Games where people compete for a cash prize of hundreds of thousands of dollars, and long story short, yada yada. I read his book. He's the 3-time back-to-back champion. No one's even come close yet, since the games have only been around for 10 years. And one of the things he says is mental toughness is the key to success in CrossFit, because the sport is 70% mental and only 30% physical. And he says it's one of the biggest reasons why people succeed or fail in CrossFit. It's all in the mind. Okay, so Mia Hamm, her quote was basically, when asked by a reporter, she said with no hesitation, mental toughness. And she says it's the toughest thing for her to deal with as a soccer player, because it's really tough to, keep your head cool when there's all these referees and judges and people screaming at you. Michael Jordan, his exact quote was this: "The mental toughness and the heart are a lot stronger than some of the physical advantages you might have." I've always said that, and I've always believed that. Okay, and if you don't believe me, you can get those 2 direct quotes from the book Mindset and the Rich Froning quote from his book First. So that's why it's important. Again, I can go on and on, but you probably already know that. That's why you're here. So how do you actually achieve it? That's what you want to know. The first thing is from a book called The Ultimate Guide to Mental Toughness. This man wrote this book over a decade ago, and he is a peak performance coach. He coaches everyone from Olympic athletes to CEOs to managers to just people who want to upgrade their game, and it's actually helped some of them win Olympic medals. So what's the essential message of the book? I mean, first off, this book, I have never seen anything come close to the amount of detail in this book. It's a moderate read, about 400 pages, and there's all sorts of like techniques and little tricks in there. He has tips for if you want really quick boosts of mental toughness and motivation. And then he has techniques for different situations where maybe you have a longer time to prepare, or you have time to really, evoke even stronger mental toughness. And then there's all these other tricks in this book for persistence, for when you're really unmotivated, to when what you can do to actually achieve your goals using visualization, and all sorts of different things in there. And I went through the whole book and did all the techniques, and it really is incredible because it gives you all these tactics based on where you are at. So for example, there's this one technique, and all of them are very detailed. So it's not just like do this. There's all these steps to it. One of them, it involves screaming as loud as you can outside and really imprinting a sentence in your mind. That it has to be just one sentence or shorter, because the longer and more verbose it is, it just doesn't imprint as well into your subconscious. And that was really tough for me to do because I'm an introvert. But I did it and just kept, there's all these other steps too, like you have to visualize the exact moment of success while you're doing this. And it really like boosts your motivation and energy, which is really great for when you're down and out and you need to be mentally tough. So really remember that about mental toughness. It's not about what mental toughness is. Some people might mistake it as, just, being strong, or something very vague like that. But I believe it means really having the persistence and mental health and fortitude to get up again after you have failed numerous and numerous times. And not just failed, but oftentimes you're beaten down and just hit to the ground to the point where you're just so tired. Whether it's some type of physical thing like a athletic sporting event, or for me, I feel like the real mental toughness comes out when it's a mental battle. So, for example, it's not the fact that you're, physically hurt, but it's the fact that you're financially drained, or you're depressed, or all these things. And that's definitely happened to me in the past, where everything just aligned and everything was going wrong. I remember one moment where I didn't have many friends. I was depressed because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and I was already so old, and I invested so much time on something I didn't want to do. And then all these other things, my dating life was horrendous. And then on top of that, finding like any form of internship or job was like impossible. And I'd been doing it for so many years, and all these different things piled up so that it seemed hopeless, even though it wasn't hopeless, because I was still young. And I still, even if I failed for another 20 years, I still had many years to get it to work. But at the time, it just seemed hopeless. And that's really when mental toughness, keeps you persistent and alive and fighting. So that's what it really means for me. But it has different meanings and different applications. Maybe it's you're in a tough negotiation setting and you have to close the sales deal, but you're sweating because it's high pressure and there's all these rich CEOs at this board meeting, and you have to, execute perfectly this presentation. So this book, I can't recommend it enough. Of course, there's parts I was a bit skeptical of and still kind of am, but nonetheless, I think there's all sorts of different tactics and tools in the toolkit that this book provides that really helps. Of course, he has all these tricks that will trigger emotions in different situations. In fact, he has like different processes for visualizing your future, from the moment that you receive your reward to 10 minutes before, to half an hour before, or the day or week before you actually achieve your goal. There's all these different like variations of visualization he uses to really pull it out. And he has cited in the book that he got a lot of it from Napoleon Hill. So it's really a great book, because I really respect Napoleon Hill. He's one of the only people I trust, because he spent his whole life studying the wealthiest people in the world in person. So I recommend that book. Once again, it's The Ultimate Guide on Mental Toughness. Now, moving on from that, again, I could talk about it for a long time, but moving on from that, you have Rich Froning's advice from his book First. Now, of course, this is more geared towards athletic stuff. I do think it's at least partially applicable to other fields outside of sports. However, the one way I'm different from Tim Ferriss is that I think he goes a little bit too broad in, applying things universally. He's like, if this chess master gives you this advice, you can apply it to sports and medicine and being a car mechanic. And I don't think that's true. I think there's definite laws that are only applicable to certain domains. For example, specialization. I think if you want to be rich, specialize. But if you want to be good in dating, that's the stupidest thing ever. You don't want to specialize, because you're neglecting the things that really repel girls away. Fix those first. So as you can see, some laws don't apply universally to everything. Some of these things by Rich do, and I'm going to list them. So if you want to be mentally tough inside or out of sports, here's what he says. First, it comes down to how you're raised. So maybe this won't help you, but it'll help your children. Rich says there were many times when he just wanted to quit, and he asked why was he doing any of this. And that's when his upbringing kicked in. His father beat into him a tough work ethic by making him doing a lot of manual labor tasks, sometimes just to do them. There wasn't really like a net payoff in terms of money made. And that really pushed them to really learn that sometimes you just got to keep pushing through. It became a habit. Second thing is improve before you need it. So you really got to push yourself in practice. He's coached many CrossFit wannabes and CrossFit athletes himself, and he's found a distinction. He's found that many people had genetic talents, but they relied on them like a crutch. And it got them through high school. But then when they hit college and they competed against other people, their talent wasn't enough. They were facing people who had just as much talent, but they had also worked really hard and pushed the limits of their mental toughness, and they could not compete. So therefore, don't rely on your genetic talent as a crutch. Keep pushing your comfort zone when you're practicing. Another thing he said is you have to surround yourself with people better than you. It's a cliche, but critical to your success. And also, you have to have a goal that is very clear and definitive, and preferably one that is beyond yourself. Rich's goal wasn't selfish. It was beyond himself, and it was to promote Christianity. Everything he did was for promoting that, and that's what really pushed him to become a world champion in CrossFit. Now let's move on from Rich, and let's talk about some other advice from other people on mental toughness. Now I'm going to jump to Josh Waitzkin. I was reading his book. I finished his book, The Art of Learning. This guy is really interesting. By the time he was age 30, early 30s, he had become late master or grandmaster, like one of the last two highest titles in chess. And he had also become the world champion in Tai Chi Chuan push hands, which is a sort of martial arts. Now, there's some debate on whether this martial art is actually as applicable or useful or for show as a real martial art like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've seen videos of him competing, in push hands, and I would say it is fairly physical. Maybe there's still some stuff, that's for sure, but there's a lot of physical as well. And so the question remains, how did he become, a chess prodigy, push hands world champion, and then a first degree black belt under one of the world champion Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu masters, Marcelo Garcia, in such a record amount of time, when there were people who spent their entire lives training for push hands and chess and all these other things. And so he had a number of things to say. I want to highlight one from this book. He has this thing called triggers, which is eerily similar to what was talked about in The Ultimate Guide to Mental Toughness. And both of them say that you kind of have to have this whole routine to really pump up your emotions or get you into that state. So in The Ultimate Guide to Mental Toughness, it really surrounded around visualizing in immense detail the before, present, and after moments of that moment when you win the award or whatever goal that you're trying to achieve that will give you the most emotion. For Josh Waitzkin, he instead recommends that you choose the state that you're trying to drive for. So maybe it's calmness rather than massive energy and motivation. But whatever it was, they both said the same thing. Then you want to kind of start, creating a daily routine to create that state. So for Josh, he recommends, finding when you're already at that state and then doing all sorts of stuff before that moment. And then what you're pretty much doing is chaining something that's not really related to that moment of the state, so that you've conditioned yourself. And then when you can't actually, create that state because you can't do that thing, you have that other activity. So to give you an example, you're probably like, what the heck? I get really calm when I walk in a park. Well, I can't always walk in a park to get calm, especially when I'm in the office or I have a business meeting or something like that. So what do you do instead? Well, you chain all these other things that aren't related, but might be some form of routine. Maybe it's I'll listen to music, do 10 push-ups, do a yoga routine, and do all of those things before going on a walk on the park each time. And it's classical Pavlovian effect, classical conditioning. You're simply doing the same thing that Pavlov did with the dog. He hit the bell and then fed the dog, and the dogs drooled. And then one day he hit the bell but didn't feed the dogs, and the dogs still drooled. So in a similar way, you leverage that. You leverage a human flaw or human behavioral bias for your benefit rather than for a bad result. And you do that by doing this, and then both Waitzkin and the book recommends, over time you gradually reduce the time it takes you to do the routines before. So maybe it takes you an hour before your walk every day. Let's say it takes me an hour to do yoga and all those other things. Well, you slowly reduce that time, 45 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, maybe, and you do it slowly so that you still maintain that same state that you want to achieve. And so by doing this, you can achieve states of immense serenity or calmness or mental toughness or motivation, whatever you're looking for, with classical conditioning. And the Ultimate Guide to Mental Toughness, it goes so far as to say that in extreme situations, sometimes you only have like a split second, maybe it's during a competition, to really create that emotion. So you can get it down to that small. And he recommends something as small as tapping your thumb or your toe and just letting the visualization explode. The best one I found that he recommends is conditioning by chaining one of your favorite songs that gives you the most energy. For me, it's a song called Thunderstruck by AC/DC. The song by its nature just gives you a lot of energy, or at least it gives me a lot of energy, and then just chaining massive amounts of visualization to that. Once you do enough, you get to a point where when you play the song, it immediately triggers the motivation without you having to do the whole visualization exercise. But it takes time, and of course, you have to keep doing it. So what else do I recommend? Well, I have to take this one from Arnold Schwarzenegger. This one I got from his books, his interviews. Tim Ferriss interviewed him, and many other people on YouTube have interviewed him. And it's very clear to me that how was Arnold Schwarzenegger able to become so mentally tough that he was able to become Mr. Olympia, and then he was able to become a real estate millionaire before his acting days, and then he was able to become the world's highest paid actor, and then become a governor of California. And he probably would be, at least try to become president if it wasn't legally impossible, since he wasn't born in the U.S. For him, it was because he had a very clear vision and exceptional desire to achieve that mission. He wanted to become a champion, and he had that motivation not only because his parents came from very poverty-stricken times and he really needed to make it or his family and himself would suffer, but because he was inspired to become a champion. The only downside I have for that when I try to implement that is that I don't think and maybe not you, I'm not as motivated to become like the best of the best of the best, or to become a champion. And I don't necessarily have all those like economic downsides, like my family's gonna die if I don't make this happen. So I can't say that motivation is there. Arnold actually said in another interview by Tim that it's okay. Many different people have different, variations of success, and not everyone has that motivation. But for him, that's what did it for him. That's what kept him so mentally tough. Perhaps if you do have that level of motivation, you can channel it better than I can. So I just want to conclude with the last tip I have for you. And this one comes from Caroline Paul. She's a firefighter, daredevil, climbed the Golden Gate Bridge, did all sorts of crazy stuff. And for her, here's what she said. I'm not against fear. I think fear is definitely important. It's there to keep us safe. But I do feel like some people give it too much priority. It's one of the many things we use to assess the situation. I am pro-bravery. That's my paradigm. And she goes on to talk about everything. I just want to highlight what she said. I take fear and say, well, how much priority am I going to give this? And I put it where it belongs. So don't let fear get you. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you in the next podcast episode.
Thank you for listening to Will's Personal Development Podcast. You can find more at willyoulaugh.com.